I'd like to do a study of Psalm 112, and I'm going to read the portions of Scripture that I've underlined here. Blessed is the man that feareth the Lord, that delights greatly in his commandments. He shall not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is fixed, trusting in the Lord. His heart is established. The wicked shall see it and be grieved. He shall gnash with his teeth. I don't know if there's anything that causes the malignant, narcissistic, abusive parent more grief than to see us established in the very thing he or she has rejected, which is a heart established in truth and light. A heart acknowledging and reverencing one greater than themselves and greater than their parents. If you are the adult child of a narcissistic parent, you know this all too well. In so many cases, our narcissistic caregivers detected within us a heart that respected many of the things that our Creator represents. Things such as truth, light, love, and righteousness. Our narcissistic parents recognized this aspect of character being formed within us during the earliest development of our personalities, often before we were old enough to attend preschool or kindergarten. We had a heart for God. We had a heart for good. We had a heart for reality. The foundations required for morally responsible adulthood were in place inside of us. And though our behavior may not have mirrored our hearts much of the time, we were kids, and we still are in a lot of ways. That spark of light residing inside of us shone through just enough to alarm the malignant parent. We had a conscience, and we were learning to follow it. Our young personalities were being molded by the light within us. As immature as our consciences may have been, we were still sensitive and discerning enough to be aware of something greater than ourselves and someone greater than ourselves. At some point during early childhood, we made a decision. Something was established within our heart of hearts. Although this decision was made on a primal, subconscious, and inexpressible level, a decision was made to follow that knowing within us. We allowed our conscience to establish something deep inside of us on a level well beyond conscious thought or understanding. We recognized and acknowledged a part of our inner being that our narcissistic parents had long ago rejected. Our identity was and would forever be established by that inexpressible, intangible, and divine-like force illuminating the very core of our personhood, the thing we call the human conscience. and they hated us for it. Our conscience, the sense or consciousness of the moral goodness or blameworthiness of our own conduct, of our own intentions, or our own character, together with a feeling of obligation to do right or be good, became the very underpinning of our being, our sense of who we were, our sense of what we were, and our sense of what we were to become. Our NPD parents received their sense of who and what they were externally, not from within. Being cut off from any degree of inner life, and this by choice, the foundation of their identity, being, and worth came from and comes from an external environment. To put another way, their identity was and is established by something outside themselves. Constrained by the desire to appear right and to appear good and in control, our narcissistic parents were thus compelled to manipulate their external environment. And as their children, we were part of that environment. Corrupt the conscience, control the child. It is not the easiest thing in the world to control another human being, even if that other human being happens to be one's own child. Autonomy is a godly thing. Individuality, it's a godly thing. Creativity is a godly thing. Autonomy, individuality, and creativity are not handed over to another human being automatically, easily, or naturally, nor were they meant to be. These are things never to be handed over to another, and to do so is nothing less than slavery. The fact we live in a somewhat politically free society, a society free of institutionalized slavery, makes it necessary for one attempting to make a psychological slave of you to corrupt, rattle, and if possible outright destroy the part of you from which your autonomy, individuality, and creativity flow. The abuser must do whatever is necessary to affect the inner life of the intended victim. The abuser must affect that facet of being from which the non-narcissist obtains their sense of worth, purpose, and rightness. The inner foundations upon which the intended victim's identity and sense of rightness rest must be shaken to the core if the abuser is to successfully control, exploit, or even destroy. The thing targeted by the malignant narcissist for corruption, pollution, and defilement. The thing targeted in order to control and or destroy his designated victim is the conscience. The irony is the object of the abuser's attack is the very thing the abuser has corrupted, polluted, and defiled within himself. Malignant narcissists seek to defile that which they have defiled within themselves. And here's a verse of Scripture that touches on this. To the pure in heart and conscience, all things are pure, but to the defiled and corrupt and unbelieving, nothing is pure. Their very minds and consciences are defiled and polluted. They profess to know God. They profess to recognize, perceive, and be acquainted with Him, but they deny and disown and renounce Him by what they do. Nowhere is this targeting of the conscience played out more clearly than in family systems overlorded by a narcissistic parent with his or her children. In order to exercise and maintain power over the most intimate aspects of their children's inner and outer lives, narcissistic parents will attack and smother their young victims' consciences. The war waged by the abusive parent on the targeted child's conscience affects the child in a multitude of ways. One way would be self-perception issues, in which the child views herself as flawed, unwhole, not right, and only worthy of blame. Another way would be hypercritical thought and emotions, often spawned from misinterpretation of the victim's own conscience. Misinterpretation due to the perverted tutelage of the abuser parent. For instance, the flooding of the scapegoat child's consciousness with self-loathing thoughts and images, all from a simple pang of the conscience. As a side note, this is why many scapegoated children attempt to distance themselves from their conscience. Not out of a heart of willfulness or rebellion, but for relief from the hypercritical voice inside their mind. This distancing from the conscience can lead to self-destructive behavior that looks like rebellion against God and looks like rebellion against the parents or even the victim's own conscience. But it is not. These and other mental, emotional, and spiritual malfunctions brought on by narcissistic abuse can and often do lead to the psychological enslavement of the victim. What I will focus on in part 2 is the malignant parent's indefatigable drive to disquiet, discompose, disturb, and unsettle the inner light that is the very foundation of the targeted child's sense of worth, sense of self, and sense of being.